This is the story of Murasaki Shikibu. Murasaki Shikibu was born in Japan into a northern Fujiwara clan, descended from Fujiwara no Yoshifujiya, the first 19th century Fujiwara regent. The Fujiwara clan dominated court politics until the ending of the 11th century through strategic marriage of Fujiwara daughters into imperial families and the use of regents. In the late 10th century and the early 11th century, Fujiwara no Michinaga arranged his four daughters into marriage with emperors, giving them unprecedented power. But her branch of family gradually lost power and put in the time of the Michinaga birth was at the middle of lower rank of the Heian aristocracy, the level of provincial governors. The lower rank of the nobility were typically posted out of court to undiminishable portions in the province, excluded from the centralized power and court in Kyoto. Despite the lost status, the family had a representative amount of the literary thought. Murasaki paternal great-grandfather and grandfather, who both were greatly known poets. Her great-grandfather has 56 poems, including in 13 of the 31 imperial enhancements. The collection of 36 poems and the Yamato Monogatari. Her grandfather and great-grandfather both had been friendly with Kino, who became noble for popularizing verse writing in Japanese. Her father attended State Academy and became a well-known, respected scholar of Japan's classics and poetry. He entered public service around 968 as a modern official and was given a governorship in 996. He stayed in service until about 1018. Her mother was descended from the same branch of a northern Fujiwara as Temteki. The couple has 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. Musaki's real name is not known, as for a lot of women were at that period. She went by the name Murasaki Shikibu. Women took nicknames associated with a male relative. Shikibu refers to the Ministry of Ceremonial, where her father was a fantastic functionary. Masiru may be derived from color violent associated with worship. The meaning of the word Fuji, although it was more likely Masiru, was a court nickname. Family told her that most women names aren't in. Most women don't really be in the writing industry, and at 10:7 diary itery. Murasaki was unconvinced because she lived in her father's household. When her young brother, their mother died previously, perhaps at childbirth when the child was quite young. Murasaki had at least three half siblings raised with their mother. She was very close to one of her sisters who died at her age 12 in her 20s. Murasaki was born at a period where Japan was becoming more insolent. After missions to Japan had ended and a strong national culture was emerging in the 9th and 10th century, Japanese gradually became a writing language through the development of kana, a syllabary based on abbreviation of Chinese characters. In Murasaki's lifetime, men continued to write Japanese, the language of government, but kana became the writing language of noble women, setting to foundations for unequipped form of Chinese language. As her brother went into government, she lived with her father's household. She learned and became proficient in classical Chinese. In her diary, she wrote, "When my brother was a young boy learning the Chinese classics, I was in the habit of learning to him, and I became unusually persistent at understanding those passages that he found too difficult to understand and memorize. Father, a most learned man, was always regretting the facts. How my luck, he would say. What a pity she wasn't born a man." With her brother, she studied Chinese language and was probably also received instructions in more traditional subjects such as music, calligraph, and Chinese poetry. Murasaki's education was unorthodox. Murasaki was aware that others saw her as pretentious, awkward, difficult to approach, prickly, too fond of her tales, haughtily, prone to vulgarity, disdainful, and scornful. The women of her status had very scheduled lives, allowing them to speak to only males of their family members. In fact, she only spoke to her brother and her father at most times, and only mainly shared her poems with women, but never men. Unlike most noble women of her status, she did not marry on reaching poverty. In fact, she stayed with her father until her mid-20s or mainly early 30s. In 996, her father reached a promotion when Murasaki was with him. Although most women of her status did not stay away for very long, definitely not in the really large distances. She returned to Kyoto probably in 998 to marry her father's friend, Nobunata, an older second cousin descendant from the same branch of the Fyoku clan. In his late 40s, mainly the time when he was married to her, he was also married to a lot of other women and had more offspring as well. In fact, he was in multiple relationships even when he married Murasaki. As a custom, she remained with her father and her husband actually came to visit her. Nobunaga was actually granted a promotion by the government while he was married to Murasaki. He was most likely very wealthy. No one knows if she was actually happy about the marriage or was she was very hostile about it. The couple has a daughter, Kenshi, who was born in 999. 2 years before, 2 years later, Nobunaga dies during a cholera epidemic. As a married woman, she would serve and run the household and care for her daughter, giving her a lot of time to read romantic novels. Scholars believe she started writing tales of the Genji before her husband died. It was known that she wrote after she was widowed, perhaps in a state of grief. In her diary, she spoke of how she felt after her husband's death. I felt depressed and confused. For some years, I have existed from day to day in listless fashion, doing little more than registering the passage of time. The thought of my continuing loneliness was quite unbearable. According to legend, she returned to Ishidami Dora at Lake Biwa, where she was inspired to write Tale of the Genji in on a on a August night while looking at the moon, although some scholars disbelieved it. Japanese artists often depicted her as looking at the moon for inspiration. She may have been committed to writing the story and may have known an excellent quarter in a simpler position to her hero, Prince Genji. She would bring newly written chapters of Genji to her friends who, to tell turn, would have recopied them and passed them on. While doing this, got great reputation of an artist or author. She became lady in writing in her early to mid-30s at court, most likely because of her reputation as an artist. Her diary evidenced that she exchanged poems with Mitsunaga after her father's death, leading to suspicion that the two were lovers. But there's no evidence proving this, although he has brought her to his court without official channel. Melhan thinks Mitsunaga wanted to have her at court to educate his daughter. When in 995, Michana's two brothers died, leaving the region vacant. Naga quickly won the power struggle against his nephew, aiding by his sister. He assumed power. Teshi had supported her brother, who was later discredited and punished from the court because of his loss of power. 4 years later, Michanaka sent Shinoshi, his oldest daughter, to the emperor Itachigo harem when she was at about 12. A year later, placing Mihoshi there, an effect to undermine Tenshi's influence increased Mihoshi's standing. Matsunagi had her name exchanged through Tenshi already holding the title. Tenshi holding the usual title of lustrous hair bearer. About 5 years later, Michinaga brought Murasaki to Shinshi's court in a position that Baron describes as a campaigning tutor. In Chicho's mother and Mochigana's sister, Senshi was influenced by salon, has a influential salon, and Michinaga probably wanted Shinshi to surround himself with skilled women such as Murasaki to build a rival salon. Shinshi was 16 to 19 when Murasaki joined her. She gathered around her talented women writers. The rivalry among the women or the rivalry that exists among the women is evident in Murasaki's diary. Where she wrote, inspirationally of Izumi. Izumi Shikaku is an immune letter writer, but there is something not very satisfying about her. She has gifts for dashing off informal composition in a careless run hand. For in poetry, she needs either an interest subject or some common model to imitate. Indeed, it does not seem to me that it's in herself. She is already a poet at all. Say has been served as lady in writing to Tishi since Soshi became into court. It is possible that Murasaki was invited to Shinshi's court as a rival to Sei. Teshi died in 1001 before Murasaki entered serving with Senshi, so the two writers were not there considerately. But Murasaki continually knew of her, and to an extent was influenced by her. Murasaki and Shinshi had different temperaments. Shinshi was witty, clever, and outspoken. Murasaki was withdrawn and sensitive. Entries in Murasaka's diary show that the two may not have been on good terms. Murasaki wrote, Sai was dreadfully considered. She thought of herself so clever, literate of her writing in Japanese character, which left a great deal of being or to be desired. Murasaki compares herself to Shinshi in a variety of ways. Although the popular Chinese language diminished in the late Heian era, China ballads continued to be popular. Murasaki taught Chinese to Soshi, who was interested in Chinese art and Julius ballads. Upon becoming impressed, Shinshi installed scenes with Chinese script, causing outrage because writing Chinese was supposed to be something that only a man can do during that time, and women ought to stick with writing Chinese. Murasaki, with her unconventional classic Chinese education, was the only of the few women available to teach Shinshi classical Chinese. Murasaki, who was reticent about her Chinese education, only taught two women in secrecy, written in her diary. Since last summer, very secretly, an odd moment went here happened to will be not one about. I have been reading with her madam. There is, of course, being no questions of formal lesson. I have thought it best to say nothing about the matter to anyone or anybody. Murasaki has two nicknames: Lady of the Chronicles for teaching Shinshi Chinese literature after an incident in which chapters of Genji was read aloud to the emperor and his courts, one of whom remarked that the artist shone as high level in education. Murasaki wrote in her diary, "How utterly ridiculous would I, who hesitated to reveal my learning to my women and at home, ever think of doing so at court?" Although meant to be assuring, Melhan believed Murasaki was probably flattered by the nickname. The attitude toward the Chinese language was contradictory. In Tashi's court, Chinese has been flaunted and considered a symbol of imperial ruling. Yet, in Tashi's salon, was a great deal of hostility toward the language, perhaps owing to political expedience during a period when Chinese began to be rejected in favor of Chinese. Even though Shashi herself was a student of the language, the hostility may have affected Murasaki and her opinion of the court, and forced her to hide her knowledge of Chinese. Unlike Sai, and as well as outspoken about her knowledge of Chinese, Murasaki seems to have been humble, an attitude which impressed or believed to impress Michinaga. Although Murasaki used Chinese and incorporated in her writing, she publicly rejected the language, a commendable attitude during this time of period. Murasaki was unhappy with court life. No surviving records show that she entered poetry competitively. She shared some of her work with other ladies during her service. In general, unlike Sai, Murasaki gave the impression that she was unhappy and disliked court life. The other women in writing and the drunken rivalry, she did, however, become close friends with lady in writing named Lady Seisho, and she wrote of the winters that she enjoyed. "I love to see the snow here." In her diary, she wrote about Soshi's court. She has gathered around her a number of very wealthy women. Her Majesty is beginning to acquire more experience of life and no longer judge others by the same rigid standard as before. But meanwhile, her court has gained a reputation for extreme dullness. Murasaki disliked the men in the court whom she thought was drunk or just plain stupid. Michinaga pressured her and pursued her screenliness and her flirtation with him. So in her diary says, at later 10:10, yet, so she wrote to him in a poem, "You have neither read my books nor won my love." In her diary, she recorded having to avoid advancements from Michinaga. One night, he snuck inside of her bedroom, stealing a newly wrote chapter of Genji. However, Michinaga's patronage was essential if she would continue writing. Mizunagi described her daughter court abilities, the lavish ceremony. Murasaki did not like writing. She liked writing on her own because she didn't feel that she was getting well deserved when it comes to the general public of the court. Writing of herself, I am wrapped up in the study of ancient stories, living all the time in a poetical world of my own, scarcely realizing the existence of other people. But then they get to know me, they find that they're extreme surprised that I am kind and gentle. Some say she was too outspoken to make friends at the courts, and some say that her life was very quiet compared to some other poets. Racked with information in Harold's court society, and Murasaki would not have felt herself to have much, if anything, in common with the higher rank and more powerful Fujaras. In her diary, she wrote of her life at court. I realized that my branch of family was a very humble one, but I thought seldom troubled me, and I was in those days far indeed from the painful consciousness of inferiority which makes life at court a continually torment for me. A court position would have increased her social standing, but more information she gained a greater experience to writing about. Court life, as she experienced it, would reflect in the chapters of Genji written about she enjoyed Shinshin. Her nickname, Murasaki, was most probably given as a court dinner in a instant she recorded in her diary, and since 1008, the well-known court poet Kento required after the young Murasaki an allusion to the character named Murasaki in Genji, which would have been considered a compliment from a male court poet to a female author. When Emperor Ichigo died in 1011, Shinshin retired from the imperial palace to live in the Fuji mansion in Benji, most likely accompanied by Murasaki, who is recorded as being there with Genji in 1013. Murasaki must have died in 1014. Her father made a hasty return to Kyoto from his post at Ichigo Province that year, possibly because of her death. Sharan, mentioned in 1014, is generally acceptable as the date of Murasaki's death at 973 as a date of her birth, making her 41 when she died. Boring considers 1014 to be supplicative and possibly believe she may have lived with Shinshi until as late as 1025. Wally agrees, given that Murasaki may have accepted ceremonies with Shinshi holding her son, Emperor Go-Ichigo, around 1025. Shinshi's brother died in around 1011, which, combined with the death of his daughter, may have prompted to her father to resign his post and take vows at Miura Temple, where he died in 1029. Murasaki daughter entered court service in 1025 as a wet nurse in the future Emperor Go-Rizzi. She went on to become a well-known poet. There is no determinant on when she died, but we all know that she died somewhere around 1014 or 1030, between 1014 or 1031. Oh, and I'm sorry because how my speech is when it comes to reading this. All this is in Japanese, so my dyslexia kind of screws my voice up when it comes down to reading. So, there we go.